Hello and welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts. And this week we're continuing our historical look at battles of our bygone days. And this time...
As opposed to battles of our current days.
Yes. So,
it's still against the English government system, though, isn't it?
It is. Slightly less swords, probably just as well.
Yes, that's right. Less violent. So we had a day over in Falkirk, and as you say, there was all sorts of things. There was a commemoration of the Battle of Falkirk, which I knew nothing. There was re-enactments of the way that people, fought and the kind of weapons and things that they used. But there was also things like the kind of musical instruments and the music that they played. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great day.
Me too. And it was really well done. It was the Graeme Society who had organised it. And if you don't know who Graeme is, well, you'll find out all about him in the podcast. Now, let's head over to Falkirk.
Hello again. Where we are is in Calendar Park, just outside of Falkirk. And that memorial stone behind us that has got a flag, that's a commemoration to the Battle of
Falkirk, yeah. And we've actually spent a very pleasant morning.
It was very good. There's lots of fights and mock battles.
Yeah, and not me and Marlene.
Not actual knights. Yes, actual knights with swords and medieval music and unicorns. And it was really great.
There's a lot more to the Battle of Falkirk than we know right now.
But we will know by the time we've got the podcast put together.
As you probably know, the Battle of Falkirk was a significant defeat for the Scots, and we'll come on to a little bit of why that might have been later on. But the Graeme Society have put together a commemoration of the event, which is full of interest, and what a great way to engage people in our history. Bands, marches, medieval market, battle reenactments, and even a town crier. So despite the sombre occasion, it really was a fantastic family day out. Marlene and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It also prompted us to learn more about this battle, and we'll be sharing details as we go along.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please remember that other events are taking place near the kirk, including the stocks, the pillory and medieval music.
As we set off along the high street, the first person we encountered was the town crier, dressed in full tartan regalia with a bell and, as you heard just then, quite a loud voice. After he delivered his message, he chatted to us about the role of town crier, current day, and what it was in the past.
Despite the Liverpool accent, of which I'm very, very proud, I was actually born in Ayrshire. My mum was Scottish, my dad was French. The tartan I'm wearing is Thompson Blue, which is my mum's tartan. I am the official town crier for the Royal and Ancient Borough of Lanark. There are only 3, sadly now, town criers in Scotland. There were plenty of us at one time, but the officers sadly died out more or less. The duties of the town crier today, mostly we promote businesses, markets and events like we have here today. In days of old, we would have put you in the stocks, the pillory, we'd have publicly flogged you, and if there was no hangman, we would have hung you as well. The fun side of the job, I'm sad to say, has now long gone. However, having said that, we would also announce when people died. We would also stand in front of the funeral, ringing what they call a mute bell, which was like a cowbell but was a very dull tone, and that's where we get the expression a dead ringer from. We would also hold auctions, so we would auction livestock, furniture. We would announce if something was lost, and if it was found, the town crier got a few bob. If something was found, the town crier would announce that, and he'd get a few bob as well. Now then, please remember this next bit. Different times, different morals. If somebody wanted a divorce, proper way was to go to court, which was expensive. So provided both parties were in agreement, the wife would be auctioned off and any children would go with the wife.
So earlier what you were we were making announcements about was what's happening here today, commemorating the Battle of Falkirk.
Commemorating the Battle of Falkirk. At 12 o'clock I've actually been given a really great honour 34 years as a town crier, this is the most important proclamation I've ever made, because I'm doing the remembrance proclamation at the cairn.
And we'll come back to the town crier later on. But at first, Marlene and I were just fascinated by what was going on in the streets around us. And we found ourselves up at Trinity Church off the High Street in Falkirk. And the church turned out to be central to a lot of the day's events. One of my favourite bits of the day was the bell ringers at Trinity Church. Never mind just hymns, they went through a whole load of songs that you'd know. This is Will You Go Lassie Go. A bit later on, see if you spot Ali Bally Bee. And if you're seeing lots of references to Jacobites and the 1746 battle, that was a different Battle of Falkirk. So who was Sir John de Graeme of Dundaff, also known as the right hand of Wallace? He was legendary for his bravery and was known as Graeme with the bright sword. And you can see that sword, or a replica of it possibly, on top of his tomb at Trinity Church in Falkirk. He was mentioned in Blind Harry's poem, The Wallace. According to ourstoriesfalkirk.com, Wallace, after escaping his English pursuers by swimming the icy River Forth, met Sir John late in 1296. Sir John Graeme was a member of the army led by William Wallace and Andrew Murray at the Battle of Stirling Bridge in September 1297. And he died in Falkirk on July the 22nd, 1298, fighting at Wallace's side during the Battle of Falkirk. It says his armour had not been properly secured at his waist, and he was killed by an English knight. William Wallace carried his body to the parish kirk in Falkirk, where he was buried.
Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah! On behalf of all the people of Falkirk and visiting folk from near and far, it is an honour and a privilege to welcome to this special event.
And there seems to be some poor soul in the stocks already. I wonder what he did to deserve that.
Come to Falkirk.
Have a great time, enjoy yourself.
Have a great time, she says. You'll enjoy yourself, she says.
No, she'll enjoy herself.
Yeah.
I've got plans.
Hell yeah! And you've got a lease there, so hold on to it.
Following the successful rout of the English at Stirling Bridge the year before, William Wallace had been wreaking havoc in the north of England. Edward brought a significant army up into Scotland. They got as far as Edinburgh, but there was no sign of Wallace. Edward was reputedly about to turn back and head for home when he received information that the Scottish army was at Falkirk. Now, accounts differ as to where this information came from. Some sources say it was his scouts found the army, others that Wallace was betrayed by Scottish noblemen who were jealous that he was guardian of Scotland despite being of low birth. Edward immediately headed towards Falkirk, and it's not clear why Wallace engaged him in a set-piece battle, horribly outnumbered. It may be that he couldn't risk letting him get as far as Stirling Castle. Maybe Edward just caught him unawares and he picked the best defensive location he could find at short notice. We don't know. As is often the case with the battles that took place over 700 years ago, nobody is now completely sure where exactly they did take place. Our main contemporary account of the battle is from the English chronicler Walter Gisborough, and all he says is that the battle was on hard ground and on the side of a hillock next to Falkirk. He describes a marshy area in front of Wallace, which the English forces then had to come round. They circled it on the left and the right. So that's all we know about it. Next to a hill on the plain of Falkirk with a marshy ground in front. 2 sites have been proposed by the Battlefield Trust. The first one, which they say is the more traditional location, is in the centre of town, quite close to where Grahamston Station is now. It's completely built over, so there's no chance of finding any evidence to confirm the battle was there. In Victoria Park, there is a memorial supposedly to mark the spot where de Graeme fell in battle. It's quite close to that proposed site. Which came first? Did they pick a site that was close to where they thought the battle was? Or is it there because the legend put it there beforehand? We don't know.
Right, let's go. All over the top.
The second possible location highlighted by the Battlefield Trust is to the south of Callander Park, just past Callander Wood. The proposal is that the English forces were the other side of the West Quarter burn. We did go and have a look at the West Quarter burn, and it does certainly seem to fit the description, assuming the burn itself is a marshy area. The sides are quite steep on both sides. If Wallace was between the Callander Wood and the burn, then he's on the side of quite a steep hill. And on the other side of the burn is a deep gorge into the burn. So if you were coming at it from the south, you'd have to come down almost a cliff face into the burn. You'd have to go across it, and then you'd have to come up again quite a steep side, the other side, in order to get as far as the open ground in front of the wood. Defensively, it does look like quite a good position, and we'll have a little more about the history of the battle later on. In the intro, Marlene promised us unicorns, so let's go back to our medieval display, learn a little more about unicorns and other fantastic beasts.
So when people were trying to describe them, they were quite often like going, oh, well, how do I do it? Oh, well, I suppose it's a bit like a cow or a horse with a big horn on it. And by the time you've got this like 4th or 5th hand, it bears basically no relevant resemblance to the original animal.
I know, but it is quite something, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Scotland's national animal is a unicorn.
Well,
or it might have been a rhinoceros. Or it might have been a rhinoceros.
Well, it's one of those other things is that unicorns are mentioned in the Bible. I believe it's like 17 or 18 times. Oh. So as far as medieval Europeans were concerned, they definitely existed because it's in the Bible. Yeah. Like you can't doubt that. Like there's all sorts of other animals that they thought existed.
And they
used
to see them drawn in these sort of bestiaries that I don't know if it would have been, might not have been monks that did them, but
quite often it was monks.
Yes, and amazing sort of representations of.
Some of them are animals that we know about. But just have descriptions that are like, okay, I can, knowing what it is that you are trying to describe, I can sort of see where you're coming from, but it's a bit of a reach. But some of them are quite funny because they also apply sort of supernatural powers to some of these animals as well.
Well, they do to the unicorn, don't they?
So like it's a symbol of purity and ability and strength.
Yes, I mean even J.K. Rowling picked up on that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a thing that's
probably
been
where
throughout
kids
history.
know about unicorns these days.
Yeah,
but this is really good. It's really good.
Medieval music, anyone? These were obviously very dangerous times. Marlene and I thought we perhaps ought to enrol in night school and learn a little swordsmanship.
So this must stick out behind me. If I must pass through a crowd, if I go to market or some such, then a sword like this is inconvenient. I must be aware of myself and I do not wish to strike upon others because they might take offence. So a more common fellow with a sword such as this, which is cheaper to produce as well, so it's cheaper for him to buy, will have this and the buckler and be very well protected, but it will not get in his way at all. Whereas a wealthier fellow will have a sword like this, which will get in his way, but it matters not because he is wealthy enough that he can have fellows to clear the path for him, or just his own status and wealth.
So could any, I mean obviously it'd be men, but have a sword like that to defend themselves? There wasn't anything about hierarchy that...
No, in Britain, all men were allowed to be armed at all times. Mainly in England it was protected by law. In Scotland the situation is a little different in places, but generally, in Britain in general, all men were armed more or less at all times. Travellers from Europe often remark upon it, that they'll see farmers working in the field with a sword and buckler just propped up beside them, and they'll go to a market and everyone's wearing swords. In Europe they had very strict rules in different places about who was allowed to be armed with what and where, mainly because they were very scared of peasant uprisings.
Yes, well that's why I was asking if the peasants were actually allowed to have swords.
In Britain, the philosophy is reached the other way. In Britain, we are frequently attacked from the sea without much warning, and so the ability for a village or a town or a county to defend itself whilst the muster happens. Mustering an army takes time. And so whilst the army is being mustered, the local area should be able to defend itself just to hold out for a day or two while the army can be mustered. The feeling at the time, at least, was that the nobility were held to account by the fact that peasants were armed.
Certainly wasn't the case in England, was it, with the Norman nobility?
No, well, yeah.
It was a bit different up here. It was a bit different
but in general, the feeling at the time is that having an armed peasantry is good for keeping the nobles in check.
It's a very Scottish point of view.
Yes. I mean, it's the same as in America, where they're all like absolutely mad for their Second Amendment rights because it will help them stand up to the army. But the army has bombs and missiles and things like it's not comparable. but the cultural feeling is that it should be.
So what went wrong? Why did we lose the battle? Let's assume that the battle took place at the second location, which is just south of Callander Park, because we can visualise that and then apply what we know about the battle to that landscape. The English army first had to work out how to get over the bog that was between them and the Scots. The vanguard, the Earls of Norfolk, Hereford and Lincoln, moved upstream and crossed the west court of Burn to the west of the Scots. Anthony Beck, who they describe as the bellicose Bishop of Durham, led a second division downstream and crossed east. Thus the Scots found themselves sandwiched between two sizable cavalry divisions, both of which vigorously attacked them from opposite directions. The Chilterns were designed to withstand precisely this kind of assault, and they held firm. But the Scottish cavalry appears to have panicked and fled almost as soon as the battle was met. In the late 14th century, the Scottish chronicler John Fordun blamed the flight of the Scottish cavalry on the treachery of the Scottish nobility, whose distrust of Wallace's origins led them to abandon him. This accusation was repeated by Walter Bauer in the 1440s. Blind Harry expanded on this further, placing the blame especially on John Comyn, the Red Comyn. But either way, whatever the reason, without cavalry to protect them, the Scottish archers were painfully exposed. The English cavalry couldn't penetrate the Chilterns, but they could go in between them, and they wiped the Scottish archers out to a man. Now, having failed to break through the Chilterns, the English cavalry pulled back to regroup and remounted on fresh horses. But with no cavalry and no archers left, the Scots had no way to apply any offensive pressure on the English, so all they could do was wait for the next assault. And in the meantime, Edward sent forth his own archers, and this would prove to be the crucial moment in the battle. Wallace's Chilterns were entirely stationary, and they presented big easy targets for the English archers, and a murderous hail of arrows so disrupted the Scottish formations that when the cavalry charged again, they swept the Scots away. Wallace and his men fled desperately into Callander Wood, but a rout ensued.
As the sun rose this morning, we were offered an armed guard coming through to Falkirk. Tell them it wasn't necessary. These might well be fighting people, but these are dancing and smiling people as well. I see he's all moving. We're playing drama. You're brilliant. It's Saturday. Let's go! I see you!
Guys are just brilliant. They're called Clan Drummer and they're, I think, a group from Glasgow, and what energy, absolutely amazing to watch. And if you'd like to see them in action, check out our YouTube channel where you can actually watch the video version of this whole podcast. At Falkirk was a very serious blow to the Scottish war effort. They would be unable to muster another army to challenge the English in open battle until 1302 and would not dare face an English royal host until Bannockburn. But the early part of the campaign in 1298 had demonstrated that another type of warfare was possible, one that relied on fielding versatile, highly mobile forces that used the landscape to their advantage to frustrate the English rather than facing them head-on. Increasingly, the Scots would rely on these guerrilla tactics, which would bear considerable fruit in the years after 1307, when Bruce took charge of the war effort. And following the defeat at Falkirk, William Wallace resigned his guardianship and was replaced by Robert Bruce and John Comyn as co-guardians. Now remember the town crier? He had written a special poem to commemorate the battle, and he gave us an exclusive rendition of it. Here he is.
The sun had risen in the sky on the 22nd of July, in the year of our Lord 1298. One man awoke, filled with hate. From the border with his army came, Edward I was his name. The defeat at Stirling Bridge lay heavy on his mind. The brave army of Sir William Wallace he was determined to find. Where the river Carron flows, near to Falkirk town, a battle would be fought that day, before the sun went down. On the field of battle stood Scotsmen brave and true, and each and every one of them knew what he had to do. To fight with sword or children, or whatever was to hand, to drive the hated English out of their Scotland. Each and every Scotsman knew the leaders by their name. Sir William Wallace was but one, the other Sir John de Graeme. The heavy horses charged, they came on and on. Men and horses died on the Scottish shield run. There on the field of battle, brave Scotsmen died and bled. For reasons we don't know, the Scottish cavalry fled. Brave Scotsmen showed such courage, but now the die was cast. Without the Scottish cavalry, the hope of victory dashed. Sir William Wallace knelt, his tears fell like falling rain, as he held the lifeless body of his friend Sir John de Graeme. But we who gather here today, remember your brave stand. With bravery and courage, you defended this beautiful land. We do not know the names of those brave men who fought. We stand here today to remember them in thought. So for just a minute, let's put all noise aside and remember those brave men who had the Battle of Falkirk died.
Following the ceremony at the cairn where wreaths were laid, there was a parade back to Falkirk town centre with a multitude of pipes and drums and followers, some in costume, and also knights on horseback. although you're commemorating a sad occasion, because that's the one that the Scots lost, but we lost it quite dramatically. But what a nice festive family occasion it was. So, it just shows you that commemorating these things is, it can bring a whole town, a whole community sort of together, and medieval markets and all sorts. It was great.
Yes, exactly. And that struck me afterwards, because you and I have had various conversations recently about how you tell stories and how you touch people's sense of being Scottish and Scottishness, whether it's music or writing or storytelling. And there was a lot of storytelling went on that day. It wasn't put in a context of Scotland wishing to regain its independence now. It was commemorating the battle, but there was lots of storytelling going on, wasn't there? I was really struck by that. Kids got engaged with it.
Yes, there was so much there that they could enjoy. So, so neither Marlene nor I learned about the Battle of Falkirk when we were at school. So if you're in the same boat, hope you found that interesting. We certainly enjoyed learning about it. So thanks for listening, everybody. And don't forget, you can watch the video version of this on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with more historical stuff as well as current day politics and culture soon.
Bye.
Bye.